All right. So look, the purpose of the show today is CEOs, female CEOs. And I think, as you know, there's only 2 female CEOs, black female CEOs in the Fortune 500. I was kind of surprised. I'm not going to get too crazy with some of the slick talk that we got out there, because I ain't trying to make a star out of a troll. But some of these cats out here commenting, man, about a woman's place and where a woman belongs in society and all this kind of mess. It's really kind of disappointing, because we got enough enemies. Man, I wouldn't think that we'd have to fight the enemy within so often, but apparently we do. It is what it is. But, we're here today to kind of try to bring some equality to the picture. And because I think it's kind of a man's role, a king's role is to make sure the queens are right there. And the queen's role is to make sure the king is right there. So we're doing it together. Yes. So today, man, one of the things we was going to talk about, Pimperella, is business descriptions. And I think everybody's got to pursue their dream, right? Whatever your passion is, you got to pursue that, or you should. You got homies in business. So let's talk about like some of the various businesses. You got people that, people, men and women. Let's go ahead and do both so it's diverse. But let's come back to women in a sec. But like, talk about some of the businesses that people in. What industry, what kind of business is it?
Man, I've been saying I've got some people that are associates of mine that have been getting into the restaurant business real big, independent car dealerships. I've seen people been creating Black-owned car washes in my city. And then just really getting into investments and stuff. A lot of my associates are getting really into investments. I've seen more women creating restaurants, becoming chefs, catering services that are doing extremely well, especially during the pandemic when, people didn't know how to cook. I know a lot of ladies that made a lot of money,
I mean, how much of these people, when you talk to them, do you feel like they're experts at what they're doing?
A couple of them, and then some of them, like, they winging it.
Wing it. Hey, bro, you say 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah.
Dabbling. And that's not going to create CEOs. There's a very clear distinction between the women that are CEOs and the women that are not. Yeah. And one of those is the fact that they're not winging it, to use your terminology. I love that. There ain't no winging it when you're a CEO. And so information is the most valuable thing to a CEO. You do business with any corporations?
Yeah.
Like, okay, they got the bag.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So it's like when you do business with an individual got to reach in their wallet and pull the wallet out, and they're giving you money after they done already paid tax on it. So they already kind of like, they hand you the dollar halfway.
Yeah, and the hand shaking a little bit.
But when you're doing business with businesses, they actually get taxed on what they after they've spent their money. And so I don't know if a lot of people realize that businesses essentially really grow from spending. Yes. With a consumer, when you're doing business with them, you position yourself as something that's going to make their life better, but they're looking at you as something that's costing them money. For this particular show, we've got women out there that are already bosses. Yes. Like, a lot of them, I'm sure.
Yep.
And you were just talking. So bosses of corporations, they already involved with their own companies. They got their own thing going, whatever. And then we've got some women that are inside of a corporation. And let's face it, like when we saw Ms. Burns at the beginning of the show, she's not, she's a CEO or was a CEO of Xerox. She was CEO of somebody else's company. The shareholders actually own that company. But you got women inside of these organizations that have hit that sort of glass ceiling, whatever you want to call it, but want to be elevated to the CEO role. So addressing all three, when we start talking about information is key. It's crazy, bro. It's like, okay, so we was in school. Do you, think of grade school, do you remember the smartest people?
Oh, yeah.
Like in the class?
Oh, yeah.
So what was their characteristics?
Oh, man, they was real quiet. They was always in the front of the class, and they was always up there. Yes, Mr. Dipper. I ain't know the answer. And they would come up and then and he'd be like we all looking like, ooh, if we win the question, we ducking down. We like, hold on. Or you get into a trigonometry class and they on the board and they making all those, and when you first see it, you be like, man, what kind of language is this they writing up in there? And they're knocking it out fast too.
Yeah.
Not that real. And there it is.
And there it is. But what I realized very quickly after school was that most of what we call intelligence is really just memory.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because most of the people that are saying, oh, he's so smart or she's so smart, really, man, they have a great memory. But like you said, them smartest people, they were quiet because they were listening. They were trying to commit everything to memory probably. And so one of the things I would say is if you want to be a CEO, you have to be an expert.
Yeah.
And one of the things that frustrates me about, when I talk to people and they say somebody comes to me and says, hey, JT, I want you to invest in this company. And you start asking them what the company is, Q, and the first thing they say is they be like, well, I do. Dog, the instant you say, I'm thrown off because it means you have, because it's really just a pausing technique to give you time to think. And if you got to think about something you are expert on, you must not be an expert. If we want to be, and again, we've already talked about, you got to challenge you a woman. Now you add the fact you got to challenge you a black woman. Now you got to add to the fact you're a black woman that might be raising children. Now you got to add to the fact you're a black woman that may not have completed her education and is raising children.
Yep.
You've got these factors against you. Don't let one of the factors be you're not an expert.
True.
What types of things would you say, if you had to guess, would be important for a CEO to know about a company?
Especially one thing is everything about the company from the rooter to the tooth, everything, and be able to repeat it without a pause. I mean, just consecutively look straight now and go with it.
Being able to repeat it, but knowing why you need to know it is important too. And so it's like, okay, in school we got tested and you needed to know it for the test. And after the test, you forgot it. With a CEO, that information stays, but it's not just what you know about your own company. It's what you know about your competitors, their business. And so being an expert, but knowing not just about your business, but knowing about your competitors' business, knowing about your vendors, knowing about your employees, knowing about where you are today. From my perspective, Q, like that's what I would call sort of GPS. You can tell it where you're trying to go, but if it doesn't know where you are today or right this minute, how's it going to get you to B when you can't tell it what A is?
Yeah.
And so that's one of those areas that I feel like most of these ladies out here, if they want to get to that point, there's got to be more time commitment. But I guess that's one of the challenges. So when it comes to being an expert, let's talk about an intangible. I'm assuming you spend, and I don't know, maybe not. I mean, you tell me, bro. Like when you first started DJing, how much time did you spend spending in your free time?
Oh, man. I remember one time, I think the longest I went was on a weekend and it was 24 hours and I was eating lunch at the same time, practicing. And then on the most part, every day, 4 to 5 hours minimum a day, because it was my passion.
Okay.
And I want to learn every, when I was watching Kid Capri or Jazzy Jeff, I wanted to be able to do that, but do it in my own way. So, I had to practice.
Yeah. And the reason I say this, man, we'll put this up. This is what people don't understand is that CEO position that you're looking for, whether, again, it's within the organization that you're currently at, it's within the business that you already have, it's with the business that you're about to start. In order to be an expert, you have to do it in your spare time. What does that mean? Translation. It means there is no spare time because every minute becomes absorbed with becoming an information sponge where you literally are soaking up everything that you can possibly learn about your desired business because you have a higher probability of getting that A plus, like the people you said that were in the class that answered the questions right, appeared to be the smartest people. Really, it was just memory.
Yes.
It was really just memory, and they committed it to memory. But in this particular case, we're talking about you being the smartest person in class on your business, your competitors, the people you compete with, your employees, your vendors, suppliers, all the people that provide product for you. and you become an expert on that. And that puts you in a better position to be the CEO. How do you know when you're an expert? And there's a number of things that I just don't know that people are comfortable doing. So I'll talk to somebody, for instance, do you ask people, for instance, I know, like, what do you consider yourself an expert at?
I definitely feel like I'm an expert in DJing. I feel like I'm an expert in programming, radio stations. Those would be two things that I know that I'm that hands down that I got down pat.
Okay.
Bam.
Yeah. All right. So this is the scale in the bathroom analogy, right? So a lot of people got that scale in the bathroom, but they don't want to step on it. But they're sitting there. But the truth, that scale will tell you the truth. You know, and sometimes you either want to know it or you don't. If you're working out, I'm perfectly fine with it, you know. But if I ain't been working out, then I'm probably going to be like, nah, I don't want to do that right now.
Yeah.
One of the only way, and many ways that you know, because you can test it, right? So you could have taken that gadget to market. You could have just taken it to market, but you wouldn't know if you had enough information at that time. One of the ways to know when you've got enough is to step on the scale. And so what I find with a lot of people is they love their idea so much that they don't want constructive criticism of it. And I think when we're talking about women CEOs, you don't ever want to fall in love with your idea. And I would tell people, I don't want to be right.
Yeah.
I want to be rich. And there's a difference. And so if you fall in love with ideas, then essentially you attach yourself to your own opinion. When if your opinion was what made you rich, we'd all be rich. You know, opinions don't do anything for a bank account. And so you have to take that idea out. Now, who do you think you should take that idea to? Let's say you had a marital consulting business, and that's what you did. You did marital consulting. How would you find out if you were an expert, if you knew enough? Now, just give me some examples.
I would go to someone that had been doing it longer than me. And I would sit there and I would let them basically like they were coming to me for consulting and go through the process and everything of a consulting about, you know, what we're talking about. And then after, let him or her tell me how I did. And I have to be willing to accept it, man. You bombed it, but you got potential, or you did good, but you got to do this, that, and the other. And you can't let your ego get in the way of you taking that information or that constructive criticism. Because a lot of people can't accept constructive criticism. They shut down. And then they're like, oh, and they get their nerves or they get emotional. And that you don't want no one else to see. And that because then it shows a sign of weakness.
You use the word, you said you're going to let them give you some feedback. And that might have been a little bit of a slip, but look, yeah, you're going to let them give you feedback because it's a choice. Really, it's not a choice.
Okay.
In a CEO seat, the opinions of other people it's a requirement. And the only way you know you're an expert at what you're doing is if you get feedback from people from all directions. And you have to take the opinions from people that you don't like.
Yeah.
And you have to take opinions from people that don't agree with you. And so in the boardroom, for instance, if you know, it's why they don't have two CEOs, but the responsibility of the CEO is to listen to the other people in the C-suite and also listen to the board and also listen to the shareholders. But the truth is, if you've not been talked to like a child or not been talked down to, then you're not asking for enough advice. You know, and that's really a painful position for a CEO to be in. You got to surround yourself with people that are well-intended, like just a hater. I don't want a hater's advice, but I do want the general public's advice if it's coming from a good place. Prayer, obviously, meditation, that's part of it. Won't get too deep, but God ain't gonna talk to you like an equal.
No.
And so a lot of women, and this is not a judgment, men do it too, but they fall in love with their idea. And then they don't want to get that constructive advice. So when we talk about being an expert, when you do this business description, you have to know the business from the perspective of you as a CEO, from the perspective of your competitors, from the perspective of your employees, from the perspective of your customers, from the perspective of your suppliers. But you also got to know the pluses and minuses where they think you're doing good, not doing good. And like you said, if somebody gave you feedback that you didn't like, it might be a quiet ride back to the crib. Some of the things that I really want people to get over is the mentality of the mentality of the CEO approach, because the market is always going to tell you what they think.
Yeah.
And you don't get to determine, when and how they tell you step on the scale. And they tell you in the terminology they want to tell you in too. You know what I mean? You don't get to, you know what I'm saying? So you're better off trying to figure out what it is, where your vulnerabilities all are, internally, yourself, and then go to people. Don't go to your girlfriends, ladies. Don't go to your mama. If you got a great idea, your business, and you say, okay, I'm an expert, you go to your mama, man, your mama's going to tell you an expert. That's not who you go to. To be a CEO. CEOs literally take feedback from everybody, whether they agree with it or not, and they're able to process it in a way that's in the best interest of their customers, not in the best interest of their ego. And I think that's really what I want people to take away. So as they work through these worksheets today, the old notion of, well, I got this great idea. Well, you might have a great idea. You do. But is the market going to look at this as a great idea? But when you're really trying to weigh this out, you're getting your information together, you have to be an expert. How do you know when you're an expert? When you've gotten feedback from people that don't agree with you. And you still have the ambition and the drive to persist. When we came in as I just got hit, I didn't ask for permission. I did not say, okay, look, to the competitors, we come in here, we're going to do this. We wanted to figure out where there was a void in the market. What was it that we could do to fill that void and provide something to consumers that they needed that they weren't currently getting? And so that's one of the things we'll be working on later this week. And that's a little bit more of that class stuff. But I don't, you got to be careful when you try to tell people stuff's going to be class. Because I know I hated school, though. I don't know about you.